My name's Craig Stevens. I'm pursuing a PhD in anthropology. I am an atypical type of anthropologist. I use a variety of technologies: 3D digitization, photogrammetry, structured light scanning, virtual reality, augmented reality, to take objects, we call it material culture as archaeologists, or artifacts, and then investigating the usefulness of 3D and immersive technologies for meaningfully integrating communities, for them to be actively involved in the interpretation and curation of their material culture. I think anthropological fieldwork is really uncomfortable. I think it's strange that sometimes we go places and put ourselves in these positions where we're isolated from our day-to-day routine, and we're trying to stretch our ability to understand across vast cultural difference. I think it's amazing that anthropologists can do that. Sometimes I struggle, but this turn of my research has changed a lot of things for me. I played a lot of video games when I was growing up, and I felt like a lot of those games lacked representation for the histories that I come from and the communities that I come from. And so I wanted to develop the skill sets that could allow for me to contribute to game development, digitizing artifacts, digitizing landscapes, for ways that that could be integrated. The methods of this work developed from seeing people in a virtual reality exhibition that I designed have encounters with objects that they said was better than when they're looking at the physical object in front of them. I curated this exhibition for the Herskovits Library of African Studies called Augmented Curiosities, Virtual Play in African Pasts and Futures, and it was my attempt to demonstrate how I thought virtual reality and augmented reality could be integrated into standard exhibition curation. You have these 6 objects from across Africa sitting in this cabinet behind panes of glass, and then you walk behind that cabinet, you put on a virtual reality headset, and now you can open up the cabinet, pick the object up off the shelf, and play with it with your virtual hands. And so that exhibition was incredibly impactful here in Evanston on campus, but then I also had the privilege of traveling the VR experience to the Gambia, to Cameroon, to Liberia, and to Ghana, and I was able to see how Africans on the continent were incredibly enthralled and inspired and honestly grateful. And that made me realize I could use this to actually bring objects back to Africa and people would be excited about it. It doesn't feel kind of like a diminished experience. It actually was exciting to folks.
My guy, you are a rich man, seriously.
What do you mean I'm a rich man?
Because the knowledge is a rich knowledge. You are rich.
So yeah, you can open up the cabinets the same way, or if the cabinets are already open, yeah, you can just grab
this one now.
Okay.
It looks so real.
My dissertation is trying to take technologies that are typically in entertainment and video games and apply them to a discipline that prioritizes rigor in data and analysis. I'm recording in headset virtual reality object interpretations.
Okay, this part is designed as drinking cup because it has handle.
And then I'm presenting those videos with context back to the collection stewards. I'm having them answer a survey about the ease of them integrating this method into their institution, ways that they feel like they could leverage it, and improvements that are needed for them to be able to actually use it today. And I'm getting really good responses. So that's one of the contributions, that 3D and immersive technologies can meaningfully be a resource for the communities where objects originate from and exploring their heritage and their history. That's the main assertion of my dissertation. That's the kind of medium-term vision of when I get to do the research on the collection and then also design an exhibition. You can be in the virtual reality experience, you pick up the object off the shelf, and then you have the video of the source community also holding the object, and they're telling you a story about what that means.
This one, they can use it for sacrifice sometimes. When somebody that doing the old data, they can celebrate before the hair or on a grave.
So if there are any museums listening, I'd love to work with you to do that. A lot of this work is done under the banner of the Back to Africa Heritage and Archaeology Research Project, which I co-founded in 2018 with Dr. Matthew Riley, Carrie Banton, and Chris Leroy. I was very interested in the Back to Africa migration. So you had people in the 19th century, in the early 1800s, who were leaving America due to racial persecution to seek an opportunity to establish themselves in their ancestral homeland in West Africa. And so the US government chartered these trips for migrants to go and settle. And as an archaeologist, I was interested in what is the material consequences of that massive migration. Liberia presents this opportunity to think about this area that we call the Black Atlantic world, connects Europe, West Africa, and the diaspora. It's a really strong, bright, poignant example of this kind of dynamic feedback that's happening across the Atlantic Ocean. And so I wanted to see what their houses looked like. What kind of food were they eating? What is their oral history? How do their descendants now understand themselves as African diasporic, African, or both at the same time? We first did a test at William Tubman High School, which is maybe about a mile away from the National Museum of Liberia that's in downtown Monrovia. And we wanted to do a demo to see if augmented reality or virtual reality made them interested in Liberian material culture. And so we started the class by asking them, have any of you been to the National Museum of Liberia? It was crickets, nobody said anything. But when we whipped out the VR headset, they're texting their friends, and there's a line around the corner of people who want to play and intimately engage Liberian material culture. And so I was really excited seeing that these technologies were providing a way that the objects can meet them where they're at. You know, they're on TikTok, they're on their phones, they're looking at digital media all the time. And I think we're on to something that, despite all of the challenges, the historical kind of colonial consequences that Liberia is enduring and working through, that there are still ways in which we can provide not only educational or restorative experiences, but entertaining experiences that still are rooted in the cultural aspects that inspire a lot of the academic work. So I went back to the US and started just cold emailing curators that had significant Liberian object collections and told them that I wanted to do photogrammetry to make 3D models, and that I would use virtual reality to allow for the communities where those objects came from to intimately record interpretations of them that the US collection stewards and museums could use for their object research, for their databases, or hopefully for exhibitions. I needed to work with objects that had village level or regional level provenance, so that when I digitized them and put them in virtual reality, I could go straight to that place and talk to people who maybe would have seen an object like this when they were young.
My grandmother, they used to fish it. That time was small. Where they fish it, they put on it, then they will go peel the mud. The mud where it in the hole. Then they will fish it, they put it down in the sun, they dry it. When they dry it, they put more pencil, they beat it. Then it will be small.
Maybe they're still making objects like this. So most of them were masks, vessels, pots, bowls, ceremonial objects, brass bracelets, spoons and things for feast. So I came back and built the virtual reality experiences, put them on a MetaQuest 3 headset, and traveled with my headset and my laptop to Liberia, where I started working with curators and the director of the National Museum and some recent graduates from the University of Liberia. And we would just drive out to these rural areas, make connections with different representatives from the Ministry of Information, Culture, and Tourism in Liberia, who are also my partners. We go up, I give a presentation, the whole kind of village descends upon you when you whip out a VR headset. This was the first time that everybody that I was working with had ever done virtual reality. There was this belief that this work was restorative, as opposed to me just coming in as an American and trying to extract knowledge. By having this really community integrated and community led project, there was a level of trust that allowed for people to open up and kind of tell the truth in a way that wasn't as guarded, which is really important when we're trying to get at these like affective, emotional, spiritual, contextualized interpretations of the objects that escape what archaeologists and curators typically know. So it was beautiful. I went with an assumption that I was only going to be working with young people. I had this bias that the VR experience may be too cumbersome or too complex for elders. And when I presented that to the National Museum, they completely rejected it. They said, don't waste your time and don't waste our time talking to people who don't know about these objects. We have to be talking to elderly people. And they were completely correct, which is one of the biggest findings of my work that's not actually part of my dissertation, but it will be in the future, is that virtual reality might be one of the most accessible interfaces for digital media. You don't have to learn how to type. You don't have to learn how to work the controllers. Even the headsets have cameras on the front where you can use your hands. The youngest person I interviewed, I think, was 41, and the eldest was 103 years old. I think that's a big breakthrough because none of these consumer technologies are designed with an elderly, rural West African woman in mind. But to experience through this research that this technology is accessible for them, I think opens up a lot of opportunities for, one, these tech companies to think about the impact that they could be making, the markets that they could be serving, but as well for the research, for people to just be able to use their natural language, their experiences to contribute to academic research.
Oh, you said wa me to go ke mo ko mi ano bubo pega wa bonoke bole buka nyuno ga yiga kwa sikwa bedi.
You don't have to speak in the curatorial diction and understand all the jargon to contribute meaningfully to this knowledge production process. As far as I know, nobody is using virtual reality in this way. And I think a lot of the museums kind of see this work in the same thread of how can we use technologies to create more value for users, but also to have a more equitable relationship with the communities where these objects come from.
This is very, very awesome. I can say for sure that this is going to be highly needed for the National Museum of Liberia. A good form of museum reach out to educate schools, to educate people that are out there in the public, and give them a reason of coming to see these things in the reality.
What museums are really good at is telling stories. Oftentimes those stories come from a perspective of an academic, somebody who was trained in art history, trained in archaeology. But if we're not from that community, we lose some of those intangible aspects, the emotions, the affect.
Now under brother and can praise it, why on your mom will you? Why are seeing if you got going mom that you?
The way that these objects sit in their spiritual context.
Certain time when a devil is about to get outside, way by devil, the spoon can be attached to it. They dress a little farm and the spoon was in your hand. Passing, dancing in front of the devil, dancing in front of the devil.
Communities allow for us to capture that and then incorporate that into our storytelling.
Emu to was tete wam. Was tete wam. We are like the gang, that was Sambuka. I told you I ain't going or I do a wicked pee. Well, when would I be? Where would I be? It's true, you're not going to do later.
I tend to be a techno-positive person. I want people to see my work and feel like there are abundant, beautiful futures that lie ahead of us. I think there's a lot of fear of where we're heading because of our lack of understanding of where these technologies are going to take us. With virtual reality, I think a lot of people think about the isolation and being able to have these experiences that make them feel like they never need to leave their house. I think my work shows a very opposite thing. Virtual reality is putting me in the field. Virtual reality is bringing communities together across very vast distances, across continents. If we use these incredible technologies, we can solve some really large problems as long as we're approaching it from a place of restoration as opposed to just a place of revenue generation or wealth generation. What I love about this is that I feel like I'm providing value for the communities that I'm working in. There's a long history of anthropologists as kind of being this handmaiden of colonialism, going in and extracting information that then the state or the company or your sponsor can exploit. This feels like a form of anthropology where not only am I learning, the institutions that I'm representing are learning, but I'm also giving something back to the community. They also feel like people care about what they think. They're not forgotten. They have expertise, they have something to contribute. It makes me feel comfortable and like proud to call myself an anthropologist because I feel like I'm doing a form of anthropological work that can push our discipline to tell stories that inspire us for the future, but also make us proud of where we came from.